The UK is the permanent or second home to over 570 species of bird.
Many of them are just visiting or live a more aquatic lifestyle.
Others are regular guests in our gardens.
More and more people are helping their guests by leaving food and scraps out for them.
So, for the start of the Great Backyard Bird Count, we're looking at what's best to feed our winged neighbours.
And what not to feed them.
Nuts are a great source of fat, which are high in calories and provide plenty of energy for birds. Suitable nuts include peanuts, walnuts, Brazil nuts, hazelnuts and almonds. Ensure that the nuts you're feeding the birds are bird safe, because salted and dry roasted can contain aflatoxins, which are poisonous to birds. Equally, in the summer and spring, make sure you're feeding the nuts in wire feeders, as these can be choking hazards to chicks.
Fruit can be really good for your birds. They'll use the seeds and the flesh as a really good source of energy. The vitamins and minerals are also really good for their health. But fruit grown for humans is really high in sugars, so only feed it occasionally to your birds because it's not that good for them. However, fruit grown on your trees in your garden is really good, especially for the thrush families in the winter who can't get to the insects that form the major part of their diet. You can use dried up fruits as well, apricots, raisins and sultanas. Just make sure to soak them the night before so they're soft enough for the little birds to get into. And you can feed coconut, they love the white flesh as well. Just be careful when it comes to avocado, for example, which contains a toxin called persin, which is really dangerous to some birds, especially parakeets, for example, which you can find in some parts of the southeast. Persin is toxic to ruminants and horses too, but let's keep it on the birds. You can grow trees like rowan and hawthorn, which are really good berry-bearing trees for your birds. If you're thinking of planting a tree, why not one of them too?
You may have guessed it, but seeds are the most common food given to birds. A bird seed mix contains all sorts of calories and nutrients, as each different seed has its own nutritional qualities.
Fat is one of the best sources of food for birds in the winter when food is scarce. Suet balls and lard provide birds with a quick, high-energy food source, which helps keep them warm in the winter, as a bird can quickly use up any fat reserves they have trying to stay warm. Kitchen scraps can be a great source of food for birds and a way to help reduce household waste. Food items such as uncooked oats, crusts, old cakes, stale cheese, bacon rind, uncooked pastry, leftover cooked potatoes, cooked pasta and rice, as long as no salt was added when these were cooked, can be ideal food sources for birds. However, if you have any leftover carrots or vegetables, put them in the compost heap, as even birds can be fussy with their veg. It's important to remember that when giving human food waste to birds, to provide a good, fresh, clean supply of drinking water, as some of these foods, such as the oats, can become a pulp when...
So how do we attract birds to our gardens? Well, one of the main ways is food, and there are lots of different food sources we can provide for birds. Millet attracts finches, sparrows, reed buntings, and collared doves. Sunflower seeds are great for tits, blackbirds, and green finches. Some seed mixes contain barley and grain, which is great for pigeons and doves. And peanuts can be used to attract a range of birds such as tits, greenfinches, nuthatches, sparrows, starlings, and greater spotted woodpeckers. All of these are great ingredients to add to a homemade bird feeder. Speaking of which, here's how to make one. You will need some birdseed, lard, optional dried fruit, yoghurt pots or coconut shells, and some string. So first of all, you want to melt your lard, stirring it on a low heat until it is fully melted. And then you're going to gradually stir in the birdseed until you get a coarse mixture. It is at this point you can also add in optional ingredients such as nuts or chopped dried fruit. And then you want to mix it all together until it's well combined. Next we're going to make the feeder, so I've put a blob of blue tack on the bottom of the yoghurt pot and then I've poked a hole with the knife. Then you're going to want to get some string and tie a few knots in it. So you can either thread it so that the knot is on the inside like I'm doing. If you do it that way, I recommend poking holes either side and then putting a cocktail stick through the middle just to add some extra grip, or you can thread it so the knot's on the outside and the pot hangs upright. or as a natural alternative you can use coconut shells. So I've let the mixture set for about 15 minutes in the fridge. That's to make sure that the lard doesn't leak out the hole in the bottom of the yoghurt pot. And then I'm going to compact the mixture into each feeder, and that's it. You just need to put it in the fridge. I recommend overnight just to make sure it's fully set, and then you can put them out in the garden ready for the birds. And that's how to make a bird feeder. Simple, huh? Just don't forget to recycle the yoghurt pot afterwards. So what other ways can we attract birds to our gardens? Well, bird baths and ponds provide a source of fresh water for birds to drink from, and a quick way to cool down on a hot day. And bushes and trees are a great place for birds to nest and provide protection from predators.
When it comes to seasons, you have to vary what you feed your birds. As I mentioned previously, it can be really hard for the birds to get food in the winter, especially if they feed on things in the ground, or anything that grows really. Very scarce food sources in the UK in the winter time. So, to get your birds through those cold winter nights, sure you feed high fat foods and high energy foods so that they can store that energy to keep them warm. In the spring is when most birds breed, so as you can imagine, there'd be quite a few chicks to feed. To feed the chicks, the birds need a lot of food and it needs to be high protein. So to help with this, you can feed them lots of nuts, seeds, mealworms and waxworms. But be careful, not whole peanuts or whole nuts, because they get stuck in the chicks' throats and we don't want them to choke. In the summer, the same foods are okay. Just be careful not to feed fat balls, and the spring too, because in the heat the fat balls go rancid and we don't want that. Also, a little bit of upkeep. Make sure to clean around the base of your feeder so you don't attract rodents, and make sure to change out the food so it doesn't go off like this. All these foods are a great way to attract birds to your garden, and I personally love seeing little birds on my feeders. My personal favourite is the nuthatch, who visits occasionally, quite a rare sight in certain parts of the UK, but lovely when you catch them.
However, the UK's avifauna is being threatened, with populations rapidly declining over the past few decades. Invasive species can be devastating on island populations, especially on ground nesting birds. While not new, the brown rat was introduced to the UK in the 1700s. As a non-native species, the brown rat now has a widespread distribution in the UK. Rats can have a massive impact on ground nesting birds, which is worrying for the continued success of the great bustard reintroduction in southern England. Invasive species can also affect the Atlantic puffin, where breeding populations suffer predation from rats, mink and cats, along with other threats such as small fish populations declining. I cannot talk about the threats to the UK's avifauna without mentioning climate change. Climate change has subtle effects on the environment. As humans, we all enjoy the warmer weather, but this warmer weather has led to caterpillar numbers spiking in the spring. As such, when chicks hatch, they are harder to find, making chick survivability extremely low. Did you know each blue-tit chick requires 100 caterpillars a day, with each blue-tit nest possibly having around 10 eggs? This means the maximum number of caterpillars required for each blue-tit nest around 1,000 per day. Our winged neighbours need our help.
Now you can treat them with your new bird feeding knowledge.
Starting today and until the 15th of February is the Great Backyard Bird Count, a massive worldwide survey of bird populations. If you like watching the birds in your backyard after you've set up some feeders, or you just like having a stroll in the park, go ahead and watch the birds this time and record which ones you see, over even as little as a 15-minute period, and then log your results. And this helps these guys over at the Audubon Society get an idea of how bird populations are doing throughout the world. All the details are in the description for when you need them, and take part. Why not?
So have fun doing your bird count.